common predicament that I hear people are in quite often is this feeling of aloneness, even when they're with someone else, and sometimes particularly when they are in relationship to somebody else, this feeling of not feeling very connected to them, like they're alone, like they're not feeling, that they're not particularly understood, and that is what leaves them feeling alone. The cure to that really is about finding more connection with self and more connection with spirit. And really, those two things are not mutually exclusive. We often learn to disconnect from our feelings when we're kids because they're too painful and because we don't have a lot of choice about how we behave, how others behave rather towards us. We have lots of choice about how we behave. And so we end up trying some way to reconnect with others. And some of that, is often disconnecting from ourselves. If I'm not, if I don't cry too much, if I'm not too whiny, if I'm not too nosy, if I'm not too loud, if I'm not too, except, this thing and that thing. If I'm not that thing, then I will be okay. Then this person will not be upset. Then I can feel loved and accepted again by my caregiver. And when we do that, we start cutting off these aspects of self. The part of us that isn't lovable, the part of us that is too much, the part of us that maybe doesn't do it right. And when we do that, we start to feel alone, because we end up abandoning this part of ourselves that ultimately gets really scared and really hurt and really upset that that we're not the way that we're supposed to be. And so we actually essentially learn to abandon ourselves. And that becomes, part of how we operate for the rest of our lives is, until we address it. Is this feeling of, don't put me first, don't notice how you're feeling, and often we, it's not a conscious thing. We're very quick to dismiss many aspects of ourselves. We'll jump into another behavior instead. And so if instead of feeling uncomfortable that, say, other people around you are not, are upset, it's a common thing that I run into, that I'm familiar with myself, is if my partner is upset, then I get really, really uncomfortable. So I try really, really hard to make things okay for them. I try and not say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. I try, so that it's not ultimately so they're not upset. It's actually ultimately so that we're not uncomfortable when they're upset. The trick is, can you slow down long enough, not do that behavior, right? Not try and micromanage them, not try and fix it for them, but instead just notice that uncomfortable feeling and be with that instead. We work so hard all the time at trying not to feel uncomfortable. And it's funny how if you actually just sit with that feeling of uncomfortable without all the other layers we pile onto it, like staying stuck in how it's their fault, staying stuck in worry about, like, oh my gosh, if I, this might happen if I feel this feeling, right? It might never end. It might be too overwhelming. I might get stuck there. People will think this. If we stop futurizing, worrying about what might happen, and we stop projecting and staying in the past with it, like this person did it to me, or this is their fault, this is because this happened. If we stop doing that, but we actually just feel the feeling in the present moment, like, what is this feeling like? Get curious about it. Like, where do I feel this in my body? Really notice it. What people notice is the feeling very quickly dissipates, and the relationship to self begins to change. All of a sudden, you are making your experience in the world more important. And so this feeling of being alone, this feeling of being unimportant, and that nobody cares about your experience, begins to change quite drastically when you make a practice out of being with yourself, tending to your own feelings, meaning noticing what's going on. Have a little conversation with yourself. Ouch, that really hurt. Wow. Wow, I can't believe how much I wanted to jump in and fix that or change that. It was really hard for me to not actually try and make things all better for my child, for my partner. Noticing that desire within yourself, noticing the feeling comes with it. Oh, I feel really nervous. Wow, there's a little bit of fear there. Definitely feeling a bit anxious. Oh, it's like butterflies in my stomach. Yeah, okay, I'm noticing that. Yeah, wow, it's pretty intense. It's like a 7 out of 10. And then it's amazing how the longer you sit with it, the more it starts to dissipate. You know, the more you're able to start to cultivate that caring, solid presence that can be present to the feelings. So you can have both. You can have this solid part of yourself that can be present to the uncomfortable feelings. And it takes some practice to do this, to have both those things at once. The more you start to merge your logical thinking brain with your nervous system, and those two systems start to talk. So your nervous system, the part of you that just has to do something because it's so uncomfortable, that part starts to settle down. It starts to trust that you're okay because you are building an internal sense of safety within yourself. Ultimately you're cultivating the ideal perfect parent within yourself that likely you didn't get, because I don't know anybody who grew up with the perfect parent that did it right 100% of the time. None of us had that, because our parents were raised by imperfect parents. And so if we want to change the cycle of how we parent our own children in ways that are unhealthy, if we want to stop the cycle of showing up with others, even if we're not parents, like we show up with other people in the world, if we want to create a more loving world, we have to ultimately be more loving. And the first place we have to do that is with ourselves. So can we stop judging ourselves for the feelings that we have? Can we stop judging ourselves for judging ourselves for the feelings we have? And instead, can we just start to be curious about what's going on with ourselves? Can we start to, I call it sort of the Jane Goodall approach to getting to know yourself. Can you be one step removed, kind of, like Eckhart Tolle talks about, can I be the observer of self and start to notice, who am I? How do I do what I do? Instead of judging what I do, can I just notice what I do? Oh, that's curious. Wow, I've noticed that as soon as X happens, I do Y. Get curious about it. We are fascinating beings, and that's what we need. We need somebody to be curious and to care about what's going on for us. You need to be that for you first, because if you can't do it, it doesn't matter worth a hill of beans how much other people are doing, because we think we have to get it from other people, but you're not actually going to allow that to be taken in, because your belief is going to be so strong that you're not worthy of being considered, that you're not worthy of being seen, that you're not worthy of being in a safe space if you don't first believe it within yourself first. It has to start with you. So, where did we start this? Right, so circling back to this feeling of loneliness that you have within yourself, the first place that you need to stop the pattern of aloneness within yourself is stop abandoning you first. And the way you do that is you start to notice, always, start to cultivate this practice of being present with you and noticing and just being able to be there with you. If meditating is something, this is a practice that, meditators do, right? Can I just notice my thoughts come and go without putting any judgment on them? Instead of that, can you, because not everybody can meditate, so if that's not something that works for you, didn't ever work great for me, can you instead start to notice, what's going on in my body? Oh, particularly after something's happened. Oh, how did that feel? Oh, that was intense. That felt really, really hard. Start to notice. Start to become your own best inner parent. Start to cultivate that sense of knowing yourself, of caring about yourself, loving and accepting. I mean, that is love and acceptance. Loving and accepting yourself is what happens when you just notice what's going on and you're there for yourself. You're understanding with yourself. Because, I mean, let's face it, life can be hard. Things that happen in the world can be hard. And the way you start to shift that feeling of hard, that feeling of alone, that feeling of unimportant, is to shift your relationship with yourself. There you go. Anyways, namaste. Be well.